I am at a loss for words for what's happening in my life, and I need some legitimate advice, so here I am. I'm currently engaged to be married to my fiancé in a week. She and I have been together for the past 4 years, and I always thought we were meant for each other, even though we come from different family backgrounds. I come from a broken family. Both my parents struggled with drug addiction, and they were far too young and unprepared when they had me. They didn't have the money, stability, or even the desire to be parents. When I was still very young, my mother gave me up to the foster care system. That part of my life was extremely difficult. I was moved around a lot, and in many of the homes I stayed in, I didn't feel safe or wanted. Other kids in those homes bullied me, and sometimes I was even hurt by the people who were supposed to take care of me. I spent many of those years feeling lonely, scared, and unsure of who I could trust. After a few years had gone by, something unexpected happened. My parents suddenly decided they wanted me back. They had cleaned up their lives, at least on the surface. They told me they were off drugs and trying to live differently. I didn't really know how to feel. Part of me had wanted that for so long, to be wanted, to have a real family. But another part of me was confused and hurt. They hadn't been there when I needed them the most. I had gone through so much on my own. And just like that, they showed up saying they were ready now. What made it even harder was that they didn't offer any real apology. There was no conversation about the pain they caused or the years I spent feeling abandoned. All they said was that they weren't ready before, but now they were. And that was it. It felt like they wanted to move forward without acknowledging the past. And since no one had adopted me while I was in foster care, I didn't have much of a choice, so I ended up going back to live with them. It was strange being back with people who were supposed to be my parents, but who still felt like strangers in many ways. You would think that after all those years they left me behind, after everything I went through without them, they would have come back with more kindness, more care, or at the very least, more understanding. But that wasn't the case. Instead of trying to truly make things right or acknowledge the pain they had caused, they acted like none of it ever happened. It was like they were trying to pick up where we left off, pretending we were just one big, happy family. They never asked about what my life had been like while they were gone. They didn't want to talk about the foster homes, the bullying, or the loneliness. They didn't want to hear about the pain of feeling unwanted and forgotten. Instead, they acted like if we just ignored the past, everything would somehow be okay. But for me, it wasn't that simple. I couldn't pretend. I had scars from those years. Some you could see, and others that were buried deep inside, and their decision to gloss over all of it just made the hurt feel even heavier. My parents would often comment on how much I had changed since the last time they saw me, like it was some big surprise. They said it in a way that felt more like a complaint than an observation, like I was supposed to still be the same little kid they had left behind, even after everything I went through. It was like they couldn't, or didn't, want to understand that being in the foster system, being moved from place to place, being bullied and hurt, would obviously have an effect on me. How could I not change? But they acted like none of that should matter. They wanted me to smile, to be cheerful, to act like we were just a normal family picking up where we left off. They expected me to be this happy, well-behaved kid again, as if all the years of pain and confusion had never happened. It felt unfair and unrealistic. I was carrying around so much anger, sadness, and confusion, but there was no space to express any of it. I had to bottle it all up, just to keep the peace in the house that didn't feel like home. If I didn't do well, whether it was in school, chores, or just behaving the way my dad wanted, he would punish me harshly. Sometimes he would beat me with a cane. Other times he'd send me to bed without dinner. Like taking away food was just another way to control me. These weren't just punishments. They were ways he tried to make me feel small and powerless. I was always walking on eggshells around him, never knowing what would set him off. What hurt, just as much, maybe even more, was that my mom never stepped in to protect me. She would stand by and say nothing, like she wasn't really there. I used to hope that maybe one day she'd speak up for me, tell him to stop, or even just hold me afterwards, but that never happened. Her silence felt like betrayal. I was already hurting and already scared, and the one person who was supposed to shield me from that kind of pain just looked the other way. Living in that house made me feel invisible. I was trying so hard to be good enough, to avoid punishment, to earn some kind of love or approval, but it never seemed to come, and instead I felt like I was always failing at something, always one mistake away from being hit or ignored. So, as you can imagine, my childhood was hell. By the time I turned 18, I had reached my breaking point. I was completely fed up with my parents and everything that came with living under their roof. I wanted out. I didn't care where I went. I just needed to get away from them, from the shouting, the punishments, and the constant feeling that I didn't belong. At the same time, their marriage was falling apart. It was like the anger they used to aim at me had turned on each other. They fought constantly, loud, ugly arguments that sometimes went on for hours. They screamed at each other over money, over loyalty, over mistakes from years ago. There was no peace in that house, not even for a minute. The walls were thin and everyone around us could hear what was going on. More than once, our neighbors had to call the police because the yelling had gotten so out of control. Seeing the cops show up at our door while people watched from their windows was embarrassing and painful. I felt angry that they constantly put me in such positions where everyone judged our family. When it came time for me to go to college, my parents just assumed I would stay close to home. They expected me to pick a school nearby so I could still be around to help out, run errands, do chores, and take care of things around the house. They were getting older, and instead of encouraging me to chase new opportunities or build my own life, they wanted me around as some kind of a backup caregiver. But I had other plans they didn't know about and wouldn't have supported if they did. I made a choice very deliberately to apply to schools that were far away. I wanted distance. I needed space, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally too. I couldn't keep carrying their weight. I couldn't keep pretending I was okay in that environment. Getting out felt like the first real decision I made for myself. Thankfully, I earned a scholarship, which changed everything. And because of that, I didn't need to rely on them financially, and I wasn't answerable to them. And truthfully, they never had a college fund or any savings for me anyway. It's not like I was walking away from the support they had prepared for me. They hadn't planned for my future. They only planned to keep me in theirs on their terms. When my parents found out I was moving so far away for college, they completely lost it. They didn't take it well at all. My mom went into full meltdown mode. She cried and told me over and over again that I was abandoning them, that after everything they had done for me, I was being selfish for leaving. She made it all about her pain and needs, not once stopping to ask why I felt the need to go so far or what this meant for me. My dad, on the other hand, got angry. He accused me of being ungrateful, and said I wasn't being a good child. He acted like I owed them my life, like I was betraying them just by choosing something for myself. It didn't seem to matter to either of them that I had worked hard for this, that I had earned a scholarship, or that I was finally getting a chance to build a future. All they saw was that I was slipping out of their grip. They both told me I was being too harsh, that I should rethink my decision and stay closer to home where they could still rely on me. But for once, I didn't back down. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain myself. I had done that too many times before, and it never got me anywhere. And this time, I just quietly packed my things, said goodbye, and left. And I never looked back. Leaving that house was the first real step towards freedom. While I was in college, I found a part-time job so I could support myself. It wasn't anything fancy, but it gave me a sense of control and independence. For the first time, I was earning my own money I could use for food, books, rent, or just to feel a little more secure. It felt good knowing that I was standing on my own 2 feet, even if it was hard. But when my parents found out that I had a job at college and was making money, they started interfering again. They would constantly pester me, calling or messaging to ask for money. Sometimes they didn't even ask, they demanded it. And when I didn't respond the way they wanted, they crossed the line. They actually showed up at my college without warning, trying to guilt me or pressure me into giving them my savings. It was humiliating and stressful. It felt like they still didn't care about me, only what they could take from me. Eventually, I had enough. I realized that as long as I kept the door open, even just a little, they would keep barging in and trying to control me. So I made a firm decision. I cut them off completely. I told them clearly and directly that they were not allowed to expect anything from me, especially not money. I warned them that if they ever showed up again without my consent, I would file a restraining order, and I meant every word. Then I blocked them from my phone, from social media, and from my life. And slowly, things started to get better. It wasn't instant and it wasn't easy, but without their constant drama and manipulation, I began to breathe more freely. I had space to focus on myself, on my future. I went to therapy and focused on my studies and work. By the time I graduated, I had not seen or talked to my parents in a while, and I was okay with it. Eventually, I met my fiancé, and she came from a completely opposite family dynamic. Everyone in her family loves each other and accepts each other. Sure, they do fight a lot, but they're always down for each other. Her parents accepted me as her own, and I finally felt complete. However, there has been one more topic between me and my fiancé. She has always expressed her wish to meet my parents and wants to know them. No matter how many times I have told her just how traumatizing it was for me to grow up with them, she has always pushed me to forgive them and reconnect with them, which I have strongly refused. I had always hoped, maybe even expected, that she would eventually let the topic go. I thought with time she would come to understand why I had made the choice to cut my parents off, and that she would respect the boundaries I had put in place. But today, everything changed. I had just gotten home after a long, exhausting day at work. I walked in quietly, not really expecting anything unusual. As I stepped inside, I heard voices coming from the kitchen, my fiancé and her best friend talking. They must not have heard me come in because they didn't stop or lower their voices. What I overheard next stopped me cold in my tracks. I heard her tell her best friend that she had gone behind my back and tracked down my parents. My parents, the very people I had cut out of my life to protect my peace and sanity. She hadn't just found them. She had actually gone to meet them behind my back. Apparently, she also decided unilaterally to invite them to our wedding as a surprise. I stood there frozen, completely still, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My heart dropped. My fiancé was talking excitedly, saying how she couldn't wait to see the look on my face when I would see my parents sitting front row on the day of our wedding. She honestly believed she was doing something good, something right for me. But all I felt in that moment was betrayal, deep, gut-wrenching betrayal. My fiancé had taken one of the most painful parts of my life, something I had shared with her in full honesty and trust, and decided to ignore it. She didn't just cross a line, she stepped over it like it didn't exist. Her best friend thankfully spoke up, and honestly, in that moment, I was more grateful to her than I could ever say. She didn't just go along with the plan or laugh it off like it was some harmless surprise. Instead, she called it out for exactly what it was, a bad idea. She told my fiancé firmly and directly that what she was doing could seriously backfire. She said it was wrong to go behind my back, make a decision like this without even talking to me first. She reminded her that my past isn't something you just sweep aside or fix with a surprise reunion. My pain, my boundaries, my reasons, they matter, and they deserved to be respected. Her best friend told my fiancé that she should have respected my wishes, and that by interfering like this, she was crossing a line that wasn't hers to cross. But instead of hearing her best friend's warning or taking a step back to reflect, my fiancé doubled down and she started defending her actions, saying that because she was going to be my wife, she had the right to make certain judgment calls about what was best for me. She said she believed it would be good for me to reconnect with my parents, and that it would somehow help me heal. She also told her best friend I was just being stubborn and that I had been overreacting all along and that she doesn't think my parents are even really that bad, despite everything I had shared with her about my childhood. That moment hit me like a punch in the gut. She kept going. She said I was a grown man now and that it was time for me to move on and reconcile with my parents. According to her, I needed to do this so that one day, when we have kids, our children could have both sets of grandparents in their lives. She was already planning a future that included the very people who had caused me years of pain, trauma, and abandonment, without ever asking if that was something I wanted or could even emotionally handle. When I heard her say all those things, something inside me just snapped. I was fuming, absolutely filled with rage and disbelief. How dare she do this to me? How dare the person I trusted most, the person I was about to marry, decide that she knew better than me about something as personal and painful as my own past? She did the one thing I begged her never to do. She invited them back in, not for a quiet conversation, not even with a warning. She planned to bring them to our wedding, one of the most important, joyful days of my life, and turn it into something I never would have agreed to. Something that would have blindsided me and reopened wounds I had worked so hard to close. After overhearing everything, I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want my fiancé or her best friend to know that I had been listening. So without making a sound, I quietly slipped out of the house. I needed to get away, to create some space so I could think. I got into my car and just started driving, not really paying attention to where I was going. I needed to clear my head, to process the shock and the pain that was crashing over me. When I finally came back home hours later, my fiancé was acting like nothing had happened, like the secret she'd kept from me, the decision she'd made behind my back, didn't exist. She was smiling, chatting, carrying on as usual, but I couldn't pretend. I couldn't even bring myself to talk to her. I excused myself and went upstairs to take some rest. Ever since that day, my mind hasn't stopped racing. I keep replaying the conversation over and over, wondering how my fiancé could betray me like that. How could someone I loved and trusted so much decide to break the most important boundary I set? So Reddit, AITA here? Update 1. Right now I'm still processing everything. I haven't been able to have a conversation with my fiancé yet because the shock is still too raw. It's hard to face someone when you know they've broken your trust so deeply. But I know eventually I will need to. People in the comments keep asking if I still want to go through with the wedding, and honestly, I'm not sure. The situation has made me question a lot about our relationship and whether we're truly on the same page. I'm taking things one step at a time, trying to figure out what's best for me and my future. Update 2. I finally gathered the courage to sit down and talk to my fiancé about what I had overheard. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her honestly that I had heard her conversation with her best friend, the part where she admitted she had tracked down my parents and invited them to the wedding. I made it very clear to her that I didn't want my parents there. I explained again, calmly but firmly, how much pain and trauma they had caused me, why I had cut them out of my life. This wasn't some small request or a moment of stubbornness. It was a boundary I needed her to respect, especially since it affected one of the most important days of my life. She tried to argue with me. She said she didn't mean to go behind my back and that her intentions were good. She told me that because we were getting married and she was going to be my wife, she felt she had a right to meet the people who raised me. To her, it was like she was entitled to that part of my life. But I couldn't accept that. I told her that being my wife didn't mean she had the right to make decisions for me without asking me first, especially decisions that touched on my past and my pain. I needed her to understand that this wasn't about control or stubbornness. It was about respect and trust. This is when my fiancé looked at me and told me that my parents were very sorry for everything they put me through. She explained she had spoken with them personally, and according to her, they seemed different now, more reflective, more mature, and genuinely regretful. She insisted that they had changed. She tried to convince me they were getting older and that as their child I should consider forgiving them. She talked about how time changes people and how the past shouldn't define the future and how letting go of old pain could lead to healing. She told me they missed me, missed their son, and that they were genuinely excited to be invited to the wedding. As she spoke, I could see she truly believed what she was saying. My fiancé continued to argue that I was overreacting, when in fact she believed she was doing a sweet gesture for me. She told me that no parents are perfect, and that I was unjustly punishing mine after all these years. She said I needed to grow up and accept them back into our lives so that we could all be one big happy family. In that moment, it felt like she didn't care about what I had told her, about what I had survived, or even about how I felt right then. Everything I had shared with her, my childhood, my trauma, my pain, all seemed invisible to her now. She wasn't listening. She wasn't even trying to. Instead, she kept pushing her version of the story, her vision of what was right, as if my lived experience didn't matter. It felt like she was steamrolling over me, like my voice, my boundaries, my truth were all being silenced under her good intentions. She was acting like she understood what I had been through, as if my trauma was something simple, something that could be tidied up with a smile and a family photo at the wedding. But it wasn't. It isn't. Trauma doesn't disappear just because someone else is uncomfortable with it. I really tried to make her see how deeply violated I felt by her decisions, but she didn't hear me. Over and over again, she insisted that this was the best thing for me. She expected me to fall in line, to go along with her decision, like my feelings were just a temporary obstacle in her plan. I'm getting married to her tomorrow, and I don't know how I can. She's not the person I thought I was in love with. I feel more and more unsure about my decision to go through with it. Update 3. Guys, I didn't go through with the wedding. Today was supposed to be the day I got married, and instead it turned into one of the hardest, most painful days of my life. But also one of the clearest. I barely slept last night. I was up all night, my mind racing, trying to make sense of everything. I went back and forth with myself over and over again. Part of me tried to convince myself that maybe she was right. Maybe I was being too close-minded. Maybe I needed to grow up, as she said. Maybe it was time to forgive my parents and let them back in and try to create some picture-perfect version of a family. But deep down, I knew I couldn't do it, no matter how much I wanted things to work, no matter how much I wanted to believe we could get past this. I couldn't ignore what my heart was screaming at me. I can't marry someone who doesn't respect my boundaries. I can't build a future with someone who refuses to hear me when I speak about my pain, who goes behind my back and brings the very people I worked so hard to escape back into my life without my consent. I can't be with someone who tells me I'm overreacting when I'm just trying to protect myself. This wasn't just about my parents, this was about trust, about emotional safety, about whether the person I was about to marry truly saw me and accepted all of me, not just the parts that made her comfortable. So I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I called it off. So I told my fiancé early in the morning that the wedding was off. She looked at me, shook her head and said I needed to stop overreacting about our last conversation. She told me it was too late to back out now. She said she was heading to the venue to meet her makeup artist and the rest of the bridesmaids and expected me to do the same. Then she added that my parents were going to show up whether I liked it or not, and that after the wedding we could revisit the conversation, and with that she left with her dress. Since she wasn't listening to me, I called my parents and told them that the wedding was officially off. They were shocked and immediately started questioning me, wanting to know what had happened, so I told them the truth, everything. Her mother began shouting at me, accusing me of trying to cancel the wedding over such a small matter. But I stood my ground and told them calmly and firmly that my decision was final. After I spoke with her parents, I started receiving a flood of calls from my fiancé, one after another, and when I finally answered, she was shouting through the phone, crying hysterically, unleashing everything she was feeling: anger, betrayal, frustration. She called me a coward for cancelling the wedding and said I had humiliated her in front of everyone. Over and over she screamed that she would never forgive me for what I'd done. And through all of it, I listened. I stayed calm, even though her words cut deep. I didn't yell back. I didn't insult her. I just let her speak, hoping that maybe at some point she'd stop and try to understand. But then she said something that crossed every line. With venom in her voice, she told me that my parents were right to abandon me as a child. She said I didn't deserve to have someone in my life, that I was broken, unlovable, and destined to be alone. Hearing those words from someone I once loved, someone I thought would be my partner for life, felt like being stabbed in the heart. It was cruel. It was intentional. This is when I told her that I had heard enough. I informed her that I would pack up her bags, leave them outside for her to collect, since this is my place and I pay for it. Her name is not on the mortgage. She kept yelling at me, but I ended the call. Since then, my friends who know about my situation have been comforting me, but my fiancé's family believes I am in the wrong. I don't care what they think. I know I made the right decision. If the roles were reversed, I never would have done to her what she did to me. If she had told me that a part of her past was painful, or that certain people weren't safe to have in her life, I would have respected that without question. When she says no to something, I listen. When she expresses discomfort, I take it seriously. That's what love and respect are supposed to look like. But when it came to me, she didn't offer the same. She didn't respect my boundaries, so I'm done with her. I can't build a life with someone who behaves like the very people I had to leave behind in order to survive. I can't live under that kind of pressure again, where my feelings are minimized and my choices aren't respected. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.